The TeachPitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
The more you learn your own gifts and then give them away, the more it comes back to you.
In this interview, I speak to my guest about how, against all odds, he had the stamina and physical capacity required to become part of the Navy SEALs, the elite squad of the US Marine. We also talk about how his career in the US Navy gave him the proper life skills to fail and to succeed as a businessman and entrepreneur, leading one of the fastest growing consumer businesses in the United States. Enjoy this interview with Alden Mills.
We're so happy to be partnering with Hee Ha Ho, an interactive video platform that enables teachers and students to easily create amazing clickable videos for learning. Check out heehaho.com, that's HIHAHO.com, for more information and your free starter account. A big thank you to our friends at Zeus Maths Challenger, the only puzzle that effectively boosts your numeracy, critical thinking, and brain power. Go to CzeusPuzzles.com, that is spelled CZEUS puzzles.com, to get your brain buzzing. We are so excited to be working with the team Learning Ladders, the only platform that provides assessment that goes way beyond tracking to effectively support teaching and learning for EYFS, primary, and secondary settings. Go to learningladders.info to find out more.
When I first heard about the journey of my next guest, I thought it would be best to get my act together and brush up on my knowledge on all things Army, the US Navy, high endurance, iron resolve, and incredibly physical stamina. Personal features required to join the famous elite team of US Navy SEALs, in which Alden Mills absolutely excelled, being promoted not once, not twice, but 3 times as a platoon commander. But when taking a closer look at Alden's journey as a Navy SEAL and after that as a hyper-successful fitness entrepreneur leading one of the fastest growing consumer companies in the United States, you notice that his message strikes a very different tone. Rather than talking about his own success, he is not afraid to disclose his failures, adversities and doubts. Other than cultivating an iron discipline, Alden pleads for all of us to first grow an impeccable relationship between our heads and our hearts. A framework needed for all of us to become unstoppable. A recurring theme in the 2 books that my guest wrote. Be Unstoppable, the 8 essential actions to succeed at anything, and Unstoppable Teams, the 4 essential actions of high-performance leadership. The passion and enthusiasm of this goal-getter is contagious and made me very much think about the mark that I wanted to make on this world. Alden himself speaks passionately about this in a TED Talk he held at the business school IEC in Barcelona. In this talk, he recalls having to write a just-in-case letter to his family, and more particularly to his 4 sons, should he not survive his next military mission. It took me 10 years to write this letter, Alden explains in his talk. A letter with a theme to go after your dreams, reminding them their life is up to them, and that their dreams come with a dark side, where you don't know if you can really do it. Go after the dreams that push you outside your comfort zone and allow you to take some risk. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Alden, but I think this letter and the message it carried for your sons basically set you off on writing more about how all of us can become unstoppable. Am I correct?
Yes. And Aldo, I want to compliment you. That was a fantastic introduction. That was very thoughtful. Thank you.
Very well deserved. I was very inspired by all the things that I was sent ahead of time, but also the titles of your books, and most particularly your talk in Barcelona. I thought you gave that talk with such a passion, a good feel for drama, but also kind of reliving all these moments that you must have undergone in your training as a Navy SEAL, but also as an entrepreneur. So, yeah, big kudos to you as well for that talk, and I'm sure many other talks that you felt after that.
It is, Aldo, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come and speak with you, with what you are inspiring others to do, is the talk that Aldo is referring to had to do a lot with having the inner conversation in your head and in your heart, in particular when you're in that precipice of wondering, should I continue to go on or should I just quit, right? Mm-hmm. That's the challenge. And in my second book, Unstoppable Teams, the first chapter is called Leading the Conversation. You don't have to be in SEAL Team. You don't have to have started some fast-growing company. You just have to go out and try. Whatever that thing is that makes your heart sing, that's what I want you to try. Mm-hmm. And that dream, as you discussed, comes with the dark side, right? The real dreams are the ones you don't know how they're going to work out, right? Mm-hmm. There's risks associated with it. And the risk of failure is real. And that's exactly what you want. You mm-hmm. want that friction. You want to face the friction because the friction is what gives us forward progress. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hope as everybody listens to us today, they'll try and face their own friction and move forward toward that dream.
And so here's the devil's advocate in me, and I think you also hint towards it in your talk, you don't want to sink in that friction. I think a lot of people are afraid of that friction because they might be afraid they're going to be unable to navigate their way out of it. What has been your experience, and how did you find your way out of it? And I'm sure many times you've encountered that friction. So how did you do it?
First, let's give everybody a metaphor for the friction. And in the first book, the metaphor, and I use this all the time when I speak around the world to audiences, is like crossing an ocean. We're leaving this safe harbor. We're leaving this harbor that is a known, familiar place to us, and there is a break in the breakwaters that we can leave and go out past a horizon, and it's when we go out past that horizon where we can't see land anymore, we can't see any of that familiarity, onto this place that we can only see in our head, right? In our head and our heart. That's where we have to believe before we can see. And so when you're out there, you have this first decision that you have to make that, you know what? There's more to life. There's something more I want out there. I am too comfortable in this safe harbor that I've been in. So now I'm going to make the decision to go out. That's step one. Step two is right after we lose sight of land. After we lose sight of land of the familiar to us, right? That's when we have our next big conversation. We feel lost at times. We feel alone at times. And then the third time is right before we're at the next destination. The next destination that we kept thinking like, oh, this is the thing I've dreamed about for so long. I've dreamed about making the team. I've dreamed about launching the product. I've dreamed about creating the book or moving to this place or climbing this mountain, whatever that thing is, right? How many people quit right before they finally get there? Right before they see that next sunrise. Those are the three big times that we deal with this friction that you brought up as that question. And in each one of those, you have to have hope, you have to have love, and you have to have faith.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me start with faith. The first definition is having 100% confidence in someone or something other than yourself. Number two has to do with religious doctrine, right? Having that faith is really important. That's a level of trust, and that's surrounding yourself with others that have such high trust, such high faith in you that when you're at your weakest, you can lean on them and they'll keep saying to you, keep going. Then you got to have this thing, love. Where does love come from? Something that you just like, oh, I love doing this. I'm passionate about it. I found a purpose in it. I believe that we need to have both, by the way, the passion and the purpose. I don't care which one comes first. Some people are very like, no, you got to have the purpose first. You find purpose in your passion, fantastic. But you need to have a love of what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. I went into the fitness industry saying, look, I might as well work in an industry that's going to be a part of my life regardless if I end up working in it or not. I was this asthmatic kid, and I had a doctor tell me I was born with a smaller than average set of lungs, and I had asthma, and I should lead a less active lifestyle and learn the game of chess. And it was through fitness that I learned, like, hey, you know what? My fitness is my call. Mm-hmm. And that can help me overcome all kinds of different things. And asthma is a relatively small obstacle compared to what you see with people out there today missing limbs or learning how to come back from catastrophic spinal injuries and that sort of thing, right? It's well documented now. Mm-hmm. But the point is, you have to have a love of what you're doing. And then finally, you got to have a hope. A hope of, hey, this thing that I'm after, that fuels me. So when we deal with friction, it's not just a simple thing of like, hey, when you're really deep into it, what does that mean? You have to combat it with three different things. Hope,
faith,
love, and faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
And surround yourself with people that give you those things. Right?
Yeah. And so a couple of things come to mind, and I think it's very beautiful and very constructive, right? Faith, love, and hope. Those are values that builds up everyone, right? It's a backbone for everything basically that we do, and it's very constructive. When you say faith, that there are people, you said people who have faith in you other than yourself. Are these people that are around you, or are these people that kind of like your family that maybe at a certain moment in time are not with you physically present, but you know that they are, they have your back, even though you might be thousands of miles away on a military mission or on a business trip or whatever. What exactly do you mean with people who can support on?
Well, it's part of why I decided to come on your podcast. Mm-hmm. Because I believe what you're doing with this podcast is inspiring faith.
The reason why I asked about these people that believe in you being physically present, because again, that TED Talk in Barcelona, you talk about the training week from hell for the Navy SEALs. Right. And that you're asked to sit in that cold water. But it doesn't sound like you're surrounded by a lot of people who believe in you. Because that's the training, right?
Quite the opposite, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, to give some context to everybody listening, Aldo's referring to Hell Week, which when I was going through Navy SEAL training was in the 6th week. I think they've moved it a couple weeks earlier now. But it's a moment in time where they wake you up on Sunday evening and they keep you up until Friday, and they give you a total of about 3 hours to 3.5 hours for the entire week of sleep. And it is a well-documented time period where a lot of people quit, right? A lot of people are tested. And I end up telling this story in the TED Talk about how they got our first quitter of many that week and sitting us in cold water. And the technique that they did was they brought in someone that everybody has faith in, a doctor, right? You kind of The moment you hear, oh, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm, like, oh, okay, well, I have faith in the medical system. What do you tell us? What should I know? Like, well, you're going to be hypothermic in about 20 minutes if you sit in this cold water for that period of time. And that's the conversation, right? Because they make you stay there a lot longer than 20 minutes. Yeah. And like, wait, how can this be? Because they're showing you, here are these stats. The human body will become hypothermic in 20 minutes. In, what is it, about 12 degrees Celsius? Yeah. Well, now what? Do I stay or do I go? Right? And something has to overpower that logical piece of the brain going, what are we doing? Are you crazy? Come on, let's get out of here. We're going to be hypothermic. Right? And then there's something deeper down inside of us, in our gut, I call it the heart, that says, no, this is just another obstacle on your way to the path of what you really want to achieve. Let's embrace it. Let's figure out ways to get over it. Oh, guess what happens? Is it helpful to focus on being cold, or is it helpful to think of some place to be warm? Right? They're trying to get us to shift our focus and think about how cold the water is. Now, do we think that's helpful? No. Right? We end up getting colder. Right? We sit in a beautiful warm day and start thinking about lying on a sheet of ice, and we'll start to get cold. It turns out we have a lot more control over some of our bodily functions than we give ourselves credit for. And those sly Navy SEAL instructors, they happen to know that. Right? So they're looking to see who's going to lead the conversation to help them over these kind of obstacles. It's not really about how many push-ups you can do. Everybody's done enough push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups and speeds on runs and swims to be there in the first place. That's not the game. And I tell that story for a broader metaphor that that's the story of life. It's always about here and here, between the head and the heart. Right?
Yeah, that's so beautiful, Alden. There's so much in there, and I want to further analyze your journey, and we're going to do that through the challenges that you've sent, because they also say a lot about you, and it also shows the path that you've walked thus far, which is a tremendous path. You already mentioned it before. As a child, you were an asthmatic child. People said you should have a quiet lifestyle. Something in you said no, and you took your fitness into your own hand and became a rower. Could you talk a little bit about what drove you? What kind of gave you that stubbornness to say, I'm not accepting what people are saying about me? What drove you into rowing, and from there on, of course, into the Naval Academy, and from there on even again in Navy SEALs? So there are so many levels that, you've achieved great athletic things. That they are tremendous.
Well, I would love to be able to tell everybody that when that doctor told me you need to lead a less active lifestyle and learn the game of chess, I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. In fact, I was sulking. I was having a pity party. I had huge tears rolling down my eyes because my mom had sent me out into the lobby. And I was already thinking about, how am I going to learn the game of chess when I'm terrible at checkers? And it was my mom, who I had a lot more faith in than the doctor, that said, look at me. Nobody defines what you can or can't do but you. Now, we'll get you the medicine, but you go out there and do what you want to do. You go try. And, of course, I didn't get it that day or that week, but my mom and then my dad, go try another sport. So what if you scored on your own team in basketball? Go try another sport, right? The most blessed thing that I had was I had two parents that just kept encouraging me. And then I found something that I was really passionate about. I grew up on the water. I was always messing around in boats, and I found the sport of rowing. And it turned out that's a great place to be if you really want to work hard. It's a very simple motion. It doesn't require high levels of coordination like basketball does, right? And I got really good at that. So the greatest first challenge was being surrounded by someone who loved me, gave me hope.
Yeah.
And for everybody out there, hey, you may not have had those parents. A lot of people don't. Go find them. There are other people out there. Be intentional. What I find is a lot of people just throw their hands up like, well, I just never found anybody, so that's my life, and this is where I'm going.
That's it then, yeah.
Right? No, that's not it at all. And by the way, I'd like to believe that's why you keep doing what you do with this podcast.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's very much so. There are two reasons why I started this podcast. It's not about me, it's about you, but just to tap into that, why I started this podcast was to basically have people speak about the challenges they encounter on their road to success. I see that the way media works in this day and age, it's like there's a lot of success that people see around them. Kind of, whether it's on social media, we're all trying to look our best on social media, or we all talk about our achievements. And because we're continuously surrounded by achievements and beautiful pictures and greatness, we kind of almost tend to think that it's just up for grabs, in whatever what it is we want to do. And even though I want everyone to have their success, I also want them to have a good understanding of what it is like, for instance, to set up a company, to become a Navy SEAL. I want to talk a little bit about that in later detail. This is tremendous hard work, right? These are many challenges you need to overcome. These are against all odds scenarios and stories that basically at the end of the day, when it hits the mainstream media or when people read about it or when they hear about it, it almost sounds like it was an afterthought. And I basically said, I think we're doing that the wrong way. I want to have a podcast whereby people who achieved great things talk about their journey and explain kind of how they got where they are today and explain to maybe where they went wrong, but also when things started working and hopefully that will help other people to do the same. That's in a nutshell why I started this. And that's why I think your story is so great and why it's very befitting with what we're trying to do here with the Teach Speech podcast. So thank you for coming on the show as well. That's tremendous. If you don't mind, Alden, I would like to take it one step further. So you discovered you're someone who likes water sports, someone who likes rowing, and then the step to the Naval Academy. When did you realize you wanted to make that step? Was that an obvious choice or was that kind of a detour? How did you end up from being a rower to going into the Naval Academy?
Well, it helped that the Naval Academy had a great rowing program and that I got recruited there. It was not my first choice. I thought I was going to be rowing in an Ivy League school. And at the 11th hour, they changed direction. I had started the application process my junior year because it's a 2-year process applying to the Naval Academy. And I was intrigued by this path that required a higher level of service. And it was definitely for the United States, it's a much less traveled path, right? To make the commitment to go to a service academy. And when I say service academy, we're talking about the Coast Guard Academy, the Naval Academy, the West Point, or the Army, which is called the U.S. Military Academy, or the Air Force Academy. You have to be there for 4 years, and then you have to serve for another 6 years. So that's a big commitment, right? You show up at 18, and you're like, I'm in this for 10 years. Mm-hmm. There was someone in every generation in my family that had served for some period of time. There was a general service mindset in the family. And I rowed all 4 years there, and that rowing and the mindset of rowing and the intense teamwork and the amount of suffering that comes with collegiate rowing turned out to be a perfect training ground to prepare myself to go into SEAL team.
Mm-hmm. So with the Navy SEALs, again, the famous TED Talk, you have this training. How long is the entire training trajectory to get into the Navy SEALs?
Well, you have the basic training, which is about 30 weeks. And then after that, you go through a series of advanced training. So by the time I officially became a Navy SEAL, it was about 2 years later.
2 years. Wow. And then you were internally promoted 3 times as a platoon commander. Is that correct? So how many years are we talking about now in total? And if I
total, that was about 7 years.
7 years. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And then I had a break in service, went to graduate school, and then I went back into the reserves for about 5 years.
Okay, you missed it? Yeah. What did you miss most particularly?
The camaraderie. Okay. Right? I mean, imagine being surrounded by people who have your back to such a level that they die for you. Mm-hmm. Imagine what that feels like. And then imagine the reciprocity that, hey, you're all in for them, right? It's the highest level of all for one and one for all.
That's tremendous. Yeah.
It's a tremendous team feeling. Now, at the same time, you're in one of the largest bureaucracies in the world, the U.S. military. Mm-hmm. So you have that dynamic to weigh. And as an officer, I ended up making the decision that I wanted to go have a family and decided to leave after 3 operational tours of duty that were fantastic, and to go on and do some other goals that I was very interested in achieving.
And that brings us to your second challenge. Again, fitness as a theme, taking the rowing and taking your physical development. You started Perfect Fitness, is that correct?
Correct.
How did that journey start? Is this after you left the reserves, or did it happen while you were still there? When did the plan come to you? How did that go about?
I graduated from business school in 2000. I moved out west, sight unseen, to a software startup. All kinds of options thrown at me, like, oh, you're going to make millions of dollars. We're going to go public in a couple of years. And by the way, we have a ping pong table and a nap room, out in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, I was miserable. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not comfortable being a civilian. I need to go back. Remember, I grew up in the military, right? From the age of 18 to 30. I was in the military. And while I was sitting there talking about it, my wife said, you've always talked about starting a company. We don't have any children except our dog. So now's the time.
Yeah.
Try it. And so then I started this company called PT Metrics, and I was going to link different pieces of fitness equipment together. And within 6 months, it failed miserably. And then I started the next company called Body Rev, where I was making the world's greatest fat burning device, and I raised $1.5 million. And then I learned $1,475,000 worth of ways not to launch that product. And I'm looking at bankruptcy again, with $25,000 left, and no more financial support from investors, because they pulled me aside. They pulled out a new chart called a cash flow statement. Said, look, you don't even have enough to pay back your manufacturer or your lawyer or your accountants. Go get a job. It's over. And with 90 days and that 25,000 left, by the way, I just happen to have this here, I launched this. Perfect Vision. That was its own Navy SEAL hell week. It wasn't a hell week. It was hell months.
Yeah.
It turned into hell years, right?
Yeah.
And so this thing that everyone's like, oh yeah, he invented the perfect push-up. This was the overnight success that took 10 years.
There you go. I mean, that's what I mean when I said about, the soundbite of Alden Mills in this case needs to be, you set up this, one of the fastest growing companies in the United States at some point, and the way it is pitched sometimes sounds like, oh, this happened overnight. Whereas, no, this is 10 years. And, lots of sleepless nights, no money in the bank, and then something happened, right? And can you recall what exactly happened? So did someone pick up on it? Did you change something in your formula, or with that 25,000 that moment, what happened that perfect push-up device started generating sales?
So the first big thing was, this was my baby, a rotating weight system.
Okay.
Guess what?
Yeah.
People had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't understand how this worked. They didn't understand anything about it. Look, it's a push-up stand, but now it rotates. And then we answered why it rotated and what the benefit is to you, why it does that. And then all of a sudden people got the story.
Yeah.
Right? I went from something that I had to educate people on to people going, oh, I could tell the story in a minute. Oh, and a Navy SEAL invented it? There's some credibility there? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The big difference is there are three types of ideas. The invention, which is what this is, no reference point, totally new. You're going to spend more time on education than you are on selling this.
We are very happy and excited to be partnering with MindStone for the recording of this episode. MindStone is a platform that lets you build courses curated from the best articles, podcasts, and videos available online, helping your students learn faster and remember more. You can think of MindStone and learning in the same way you think of Spotify and listening. With MindStone, you can use the internet as an infinite library of content that you can curate into playlists with tailored recommendations, and it's shareable with your students. Where Spotify enhances the listening experience, MindStone exists to enhance the learning experience. Check out mindstone.com and find out how you can get started.
What would you say kind of, because I would say looking at it from the outside, it's you did not give up. But something in you, maybe because of faith, love, and or hope, made you persevere, right? And then there must have been something practical again that people said like, hey, I get it, let me buy it. Or someone maybe reaching out or helping you from either the faith, love, or hope corner saying, Alden, let me help you out here. Let me kind of get it to a place where you could generate sales. Or was it something like that? Or was it something more?
What had happened over those 3 to 4 year period of time is they got to know me. They got to see how consistent I was. They believed in me.
Yeah.
My manufacturer, my lawyer, my accountant, they were teammates. They were just external ones. And we treated them as such. And when things were really down, they had enough faith and trust, belief in us that they said, go, keep trying.
Yeah. And that allowed you, because you have successes with a big S, but $95 million in sales at some point, so rapidly growing. How many years after the 25,000 and down, what was this? What's the time lapse between that moment and the 95 million in sales?
2006, we had 400,000 in sales. 2007, we had 32 million. 2008, we had 60 some odd million, whatever that, over that short period of time, we did almost 100 million.
Wow. Yeah. What did that do to you?
Well, the first thing it did to me was I made a whole bunch of more mistakes, right? You can start listening to the press and start believing the press. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
You can start to lose sight on why you originally started your business in the first place. And it's easy to lose sight when people go, oh my gosh, you're on your way to 100 million in annual sales. You just need to sell a little bit more to Carrefour and Tesco and Asda and Walmart and Costco and Target, and you pick them, right? We were selling them around the world. And then when the world comes crashing down and you make a few inventory mistakes and you have macro trends that hurt you like they did in 2009, well, then you have a whole nother set of friction to deal with. Everyone was calling it the Great Second Depression. It was the Great Reset. Shortly after we got declared one of the fastest growing companies in the United States, President Obama comes into office, calls it the second Great Depression. The lights go off at retail, and we're stuck holding tens of millions of dollars of inventory. Now we're looking at selling all of our assets, including my house, that we were going bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And I show up at the office and going through the mail, and I get this letter, and it's written in pencil. And it says, "Dear Mr. Perfect Push-Up Man, my grandmother gave me the perfect push-up for Christmas. She bought it at Walmart. That meant it was $19.95.
Mm-hmm.
And I followed your workout plan 4 times. Each plan is 3 weeks long, so it's 12 weeks. And I made the JV football team.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for inventing the perfect push-up. Next year, I'm trying out for varsity. Johnny, number 25.
Mm-hmm.
And it just came at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I sat there and I was like, oh, I forgot why I was here in the first place. And this kid, all of 13 or 14 years old, sent me that letter, reminded me, and I moved the bulletin board right out in front. When everyone came into the office the next day, I had that letter on there, and I said, this is why we're in business. We're going to help the Johnnies and the Jamies and anybody else go after their dreams. We're going to retool. We're going to make some dramatic changes. And we did. And we did not go bankrupt.
Amazing. You revamped and survived, which I think is tremendous and amazing. You eventually sold the company, or?
We did.
Okay.
We did. Sold the company, and we sold it to a company that's real skill was in the area that was not ours. Like, I had raised just enough money to do the design and marketing of a product. I did not raise enough money to buy warehouses, forklifts, and inventory management. And so we sold to a company, and I ended up working for them for 3.5 years.
Nice.
Retooled, and company is still going today.
That's good. Your baby is still living on, and it's in capable hands of another player, and giving you more time to talk about unstoppable and, you know, how to train people becoming unstoppable. And I was wondering kind of what drove you to doing that. So what made you want to externalize all your wisdom? Because I can imagine the amounts of energy you need to invest in yourself as a Navy SEAL as well as a founder. Those sounds, you know, as a founder myself, I know these are pretty intrinsic journeys. And then all of a sudden there's kind of the motivation to kind of, I'd almost like to say give back, help people on their way. What made you want to do that?
Comes back to how we started this. That little head and heart conversation again. The real reason I went into the business in the first place was to help others achieve dreams, like Johnny number 25. And the thing that gave me the greatest fulfillment was helping people go beyond what they originally thought was possible. And so I made another decision that led with the heart. And I said, 15 years is enough time working in consumer products. I want to go work in consumer content that can help others push beyond their perceived limitations. And started the process of writing the second book, getting on the speaking circuit, and focusing my message. And while I was doing that, ISA said, hey, we'd love to have you come speak with us. And I did that, and they said, you should get a TED Talk. And then I did that, and one thing cascaded into another.
Nice. And how are you enjoying the journey? What has it been like for you thus far?
It's the most fulfilling journey I've had yet, besides being father of 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
Here's the boomerang effect for everybody listening. And you can do that whether you're creating widgets like this or podcasts or writing books or teaching others, is that the more you learn your own gifts and then give them away, the more it comes back to you. The more you help others, the more they'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
But go in without expectation of return and give it all you got.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you will not fail. We all have a gift. Mm-hmm. We are all born to be unstoppable. The key is we have to make that choice. Every day, even when it looks bleak, get up, have that love in your heart, have the faith, and keep hope alive.
Yeah. That's beautiful, and it's very true. It's also very brave, because not every day looks like that, or that you feel in the morning like, yes, let's do this. But you need to keep on going, right? That's the most important thing here.
Correct.
So you've been giving trainings to companies. I saw on your website. Mm-hmm. You've written 2 books. I think one more for the consumer market and then one more for the corporate market. Am I correct? Or is that?
Yeah. The corporate market uses the other one. It's parable based, but it has a lot of non-fiction elements to it at the end of each chapter. Mm-hmm. Be Unstoppable is the first book.
And could you talk a little bit about how it was received? So the companies you trained, I mean, your TED Talks have got tremendous amounts of viewers and there's of course a lot of response to what you do, but how is that kind of for the training you're providing in the corporate market?
Well, I talk about these 3 levels of leadership. I talk about first how to lead yourself, which is all about mindset. 2, about then from leading yourself to scaling to leading others, because a team is nothing more than a reflection of its leader. And then from the team actions develops the organization's culture. So I call that unstoppable mindset, unstoppable team, and unstoppable culture. Mm-hmm. And it's been extremely well received, in part because I go in not knowing all the answers and working with those organizations to help them hold up a mirror and see what might be their blind spots so they can move forward.
Yeah, that I think is very true. And we can always use a mirror, or we can always use someone to tell us, like, hold on, here's what you're doing wrong. We spoke in the very beginning of this conversation about Hell Week, training to become a Navy SEAL. What from your Navy SEAL training do you apply in today's training that you give to companies?
We talk about leading yourself, right? Leading others, and how to create an unstoppable culture, of which SEAL Team is a great breeding ground for that. Rowing is a great place for that. Entrepreneurship is a great example of that, right? The beauty of the things that I talk about aren't just focused on, well, this is how you do it in Navy SEAL times, this is how you have to do it here, right? Mm-hmm. It's an amalgam of different things.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So it comes in handy, and maybe sometimes it comes up as you go, because it's not always that you kind of have everything proactively on a list, so to say. Alden, thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom and talking about your successes, but also your struggles and challenges. That's been very revealing, and I've surely learned a lot. Before I dive into my 2 very last questions, I was just curious about your 4 boys, because we spoke about the TED Talk and you writing this just in case letter and kind of writing to them, to get out of their comfort zone and to kind of go achieve their dreams. What has been their response? What do they think of what Dad's cooking up?
Yeah, it's the hardest leadership challenge there is. Leading a family. Mm. I think a lot of them absorb pieces of what I say, but I still think I have to work through others sometimes to make an impact because it's so close, right?
Yeah.
Typically what ends up happening is when I am asked to come in and speak to their team, and then all their teammates start to absorb what I'm talking about, is when they say, oh, that was helpful, thanks, right? It's not usually one-on-one. Sometimes they get it. Yeah. But a lot of times they've got to hear it through somebody else.
Okay. And any aspirations from any of them to join the Navy or Naval Academy or those things that you've done?
They're works in progress.
Works in
That's
progress.
me in about 5 years.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alden. My two very last questions, I ask them to all my guests. One is about reading. So other than your two great books, which book would you recommend for our listeners to read? What is one book that kind of blew you away or that really helped you in your thinking, if any?
Yeah.
I've seen Tintin there before.
Yeah.
So I know Tintin helped you a lot.
I love that. And The Alchemist.
Paulo Coelho. Yeah.
Yeah.
And why?
It's a story about following your heart. It's a story about having faith. It's a story about love and hope.
Mm-hmm. Very good choice, and the choice of many people, and for very good reason. So thank you for that recommendation. Mm-hmm. And then now let's turn the tables. This is your podcast series, and who would you like to be your guest on the Alden Mills podcast? Who would be someone that you would like to talk to? You can pick anyone.
They have to be alive?
No, you can pick anyone. Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt. He was one of my first heroes, is the person that my mom wanted me to learn about after I was diagnosed with asthma. He had asthma too. Mm-hmm. He has several wonderful quotations, one of which I use repeatedly in my second book. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Oh, yeah.
And he also talks about what's really important in life. It's not about the critic. It's about the person in the arena, the person that's bloodied, bruised, dirty, falling down, struggling to get back up, right? That's where the glory is. Mm-hmm. And it's the glory for the individual who overcomes their own personal fears, their own personal challenges, faces that friction, overcomes it, and continues on. Mm-hmm. That's who I'd ask.
Yeah.
I'd love to spend time with him.
Well, that makes two of us. That's a beautiful guest choice, and I very much like what you said. It's not about the critic, but the person in the arena. It's the people that are actually doing it. You know, being a bystander and looking at other people saying you need to go left, you need to go right, that's the easy part, right? People who are actually doing it and are falling over and are struggling, they're the ones we could really learn something from. Alden Mills, it's been a tremendous pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for making some time available to talk to me for the Teach Pitch podcast. If you want to know more about Alden Mills, you can go to his website, which is alden-mills.com. I hope I have that correct. We'll be sure to include it in our show notes. And I would highly recommend, again, the TED Talk of Alden Mills held in IESE in Barcelona, as well as his books, Be Unstoppable and Unstoppable Teams. I wish you all the best, Alden. I hope you will be unstoppable for centuries to come. Come back anytime. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you very much.
I've loved it too, Aldo, and keep inspiring everybody to be unstoppable. Thank you.
Will do. Thanks so much. If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.